Tonight on Bridge City News, tensions run high at Lethbridge City Council after a local councillor's motion on arches is defeated. The City of Toronto is still mourning following a mass shooting which left 3 dead and 13 others wounded. And victims of the Las Vegas shooting are shocked to hear that they're being sued by the hotel where the shooters set up. Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. An email conversation between Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman and his city councillor has been leaked. As Ben Matichuk reports, the words exchanged leave little to the imagination.
A string of emails was leaked Monday in which Mayor Chris Spearman and Councillor Joe Morrow have a harsh exchange. This particular conversation, which took place in late April, begins when Mayor Spearman quotes a complaint about arches that was made and then claims it has been resolved, citing a city representative and an arches representative. Councillor Morrow then takes issue, claiming he himself has spoken with the individual who made the complaint, and the individual said the complaint was in fact not resolved. The email also includes some accusations leveled toward the mayor. The two go on to disagree about the facts of the situation before Morrow calls Spearman a manipulator, and that prompts a fiery response from the mayor. In a long message sent early in the morning of April 25th, Spearman goes off on the 5-term councillor, saying he's tired of his insults and insinuations. The mayor then appears to get personal himself, calling Morrow the laziest person he's ever met and criticizing his council attendance record. He then calls him a moron and says he doesn't have the intellectual capacity to be a competent councillor. The exchange ends a few messages later in which both parties defend themselves. When asked about this, Mayor Spearman didn't backtrack.
When it's between two individuals, we have some pretty harsh conversations sometimes. Councillor Morrow has always taken a different point of view from the majority of council. And while many of us are working together to improve the city and do things, we're working together on a strategic plan. There's a series of initiatives, and for the most part, Councillor Morrow is not part of those conversations.
As of Monday's council meeting, there is now a code of conduct in place for members of City Council, which addresses conduct between council members in Section 8. The document is viewable from the July 23rd City Council agenda under bylaws. In speaking with Councillor Morrow, he simply told Bridge City News that the email exchange is in the past, and he's not going to go there. For Bridge City News, I'm Ben Matichuk.
Tensions ran pretty high as Lethbridge councillor Blaine Higgins' motion to stop arches from distributing needles outside of the safe injection site was defeated last night. Council stayed in session until 6:30 p.m. as debate on Councillor Higgins' motion was widespread. It drew protesters who wore shirts that quoted Spearman in an apparent social media comment saying, "Instead of whining, why not just leave?" The chambers were also packed with only standing room remaining as debate on the issue made its rounds. Ultimately, the motion was voted down in a tight vote of 5-4.
In my opinion, it's not getting any better. So I think if we try something, we need to venture out there. Nothing venture, nothing gain. Let's try to see if this is going to work. And you know what? It may not. But it's not getting any better the way it is. So I'd figured that a good way to try is let's stop the distribution of needles and see if that changes.
The evidence that they've provided at the regular meetings is that they have over a 90% return rate on needles. So I know that the method of measuring is not precise. Basically, it's aggregate needles going out, aggregate needles returned, but we're going to get better at measuring the data.
Ben Matichuk, as a reporter, has been following this story closely. Ben, things must have got a little bit heated last night in council.
A lot heated, really. Probably because of the gallery being full, but also because of how tight the vote was. So everybody was kind of doing the math as the different councillors went around and gave their opinions. Probably the most telling moment is when it became clear that Deputy Mark Carlson was going to be the swing vote. He said he'd vote no, and that actually prompted one man to get out of his seat and yell, "You're full of crap," before exiting the council chambers. So it became clear before the vote to Higgin himself that his motion was going to be voted down, and that prompted him to just plead with his colleagues to vote in favor, but it was all for naught, and his motion was defeated.
A final vote of 5-4. Thanks so much, Ben.
Yes.
Southern Albertans learn more about Waterton Glacier International Peace Park during today's Science and History Day. From fishing to salamanders to historical accounts, those in attendance had a chance to see what makes up this historical national park. A few special guest speakers were also on hand to explain why this day was so important.
In Parks Canada, this is publicly funded, and that that the public need to know the relevance and the value of the science that we're all doing, and that this is a great way to get these stories out.
So far, it looks like we've had our largest attendance for Science and History Day here in Waterton. We just finished the morning panel, which was talking about fire ecology. We had a major fire come through here last September, but almost every year now there's been substantial fires in Glacier National Park. So there's some findings from the research they're doing there that'll help us understand what the future will look like here.
This was the 15th year that Waterton hosted a Science and History Day, bringing in speakers from all across the province. 2 people are dead after an accident on Highway 2 about 6 kilometers north of Claresholm. RCMP say about 10:40 last night, a black SUV was traveling southbound on the northbound lane when it collided with a silver SUV. Unfortunately, both drivers were killed. Police say drugs or alcohol did not factor into the accident. The cause of the crash is still under investigation. It looked like winter in parts of southern Alberta yesterday after a severe storm dumped large hail and whipped up dangerous winds. The system ripped into Calgary, producing heavy rain, which at times flooded the streets and left drivers stranded. The parking lot at the Cross Iron Mill Shopping Centre, the north side of the city, was blanketed in hail. The storm also made for treacherous driving on highways outside of the city. Figures from Stats Canada show a big jump in Saskatchewan's tourism numbers last year. The federal agency says visits to and within the province increased 9.4% from 2016. The national average was just over 2%. Tourism also pumped in almost $2 billion into the Saskatchewan economy last year. The Manitoba government has put out a call for more recreational pot stores in the province. It has issued a request for pre-qualifications for businesses that would like to open up a store. Submissions will be accepted until the end of August. The province said in February that 4 companies had been selected to sell recreational pot in more than 30 locations. Recreational use marijuana will become legal in Canada on October the 17th. Marriage takes a lot of work. Relationship expert and author of the book Healthy Habits for Every Couple, Kathy Lipp, says she has the keys to a healthy marriage.
Marriages are healthier when both people respect and love each other. And so it can be very easy to go through an entire day and say, I love you, I love you, I love you. But to be able to tell a guy why you are proud of him, why you respect the decisions he makes, it changes the dynamic of the relationship and it changes who your husband is. And when wives hear the reasons that they're loved and adored, it changes who we are.
Watch my full interview with relationship expert Kathy Lipp coming up later in the broadcast. A GoFundMe campaign has raised more than $77,000 for the family of an Ontario dairy farmer who was killed in a crash in Saskatchewan. Bettina Schuma of Elmira died earlier this month after she was involved in a collision that also left her husband with serious injuries. They were driving across the country in a tractor to draw attention to Canada's dairy and supply management system. The couple had been documenting their Canadian milk tour on Twitter. Their tractor had a large imitation dairy cow named Maple on the back. Toronto residents are leaving candles and flowers at various places along the Danforth Avenue after a shooting Sunday left 3 people dead and 13 others wounded. Toronto Mayor John Tory says the healing has begun.
I think it's the beginning of the healing. You know, the healing takes time and it takes an effort, as we've seen, unfortunately, before, not too long ago. But I think the community is showing every sign again that we're going to be resilient, that we're going to stand in solidarity with one another, that we're going to do whatever we can to make sure the city stays safe and stays a wonderful place to live for all of us.
Do you think a complete gun ban might be the answer here?
Well, I just think we should have a discussion about the gun problem, because I was asked by a journalist last night, do we have a gun problem? And I said, yes, we do. Because when it is easy for people, and we've seen previous instances, this one is different, but nonetheless, the result is the same. And I think that we should just have a discussion about how we can do much, much better at making sure that these guns don't fall into the wrong hands. And I posed the question earlier today, why does someone need to have a gun in the city of Toronto? And I can't think, aside from police officers and very select others, I can't think of a reason why people do. But I think it's a discussion we should have sooner than later.
Public Safety Minister Ralph Goodale says a Toronto handgun ban would mean significant changes to the criminal code. Toronto Mayor John Tory brought up the possibility of a ban after Sunday's Greektown shooting.
It is a complex proposition because it would entail substantial rewriting of the criminal code. But in response to people who were making representations earlier this year, people who were connected with the tragedy at the mosque in Saint-Foy, they made certain arguments. I said I would take them into consideration and examine them carefully. And we are in the process of doing that. Oh, I can't put a timeline on that. We'll obviously examine carefully what they've had to say. Public safety is extremely important to all Canadians, and we need to make sure that we get this right.
Veteran journalist and one of our regular contributors, Brian Lilly, says obviously people want the shootings to stop in Toronto, but finding a solution may not be that easy.
All of us want the gun violence to stop. Toronto's had the summer of the gun. It is horrible in that city right now. People want it to stop, but it's the old adage of, well, you don't know how to fix that problem, so you'll deal with this one over here. Because, well, I know how to fix that one. I'll just harass the guy that follows the rules already.
Catch my entire interview with Mr. Lilly as we discuss gun control and Canadian kids with ties to ISIS coming up in the second half of our program. Victims of a fatal mass shooting at a Las Vegas country music festival say they're outraged when they learned that they're being sued by the company that owns the hotel where the gunman opened fire. The lawsuit by MGM Resorts International named more than 1,000 defendants. The entertainment giant is not seeking any monetary damages, but citing a federal law is asking the courts to protect it from legal actions filed by the victims.
It enrages me to think that this company can just try to skip out on their responsibilities and their liability for what happened, and to blame the victims, to say that it's anyone else's fault other than their own, it's absurd. And I just can't believe the audacity of them. They're not gonna get away with anything. We'll keep this going as long as it takes.
They say people died twice. Once when they first died, and then again when you stop talking about them. I post pictures about my wife every day on social media. We talk about her all the time. We celebrate her and love her very much and miss her. I was recently informed by some friends that I was being sued by MGM. I mean, I'm going through all this and still going through this, and to find out that this huge company, MGM Resorts, is suing me. I mean, how do you deal with that? And how do you know, I don't know what else to say.
It seems as though firefighters are gaining the upper hand on blazes in the interior of British Columbia and in parts of northern Ontario. Meanwhile, in Northern California, a wildfire has burned more than 1,500 acres. At least 2 roads were closed and some evacuations were ordered.
The fire activity usually slows, moderates a bit, and we're able to get those crews in there, going direct along the edge of the fire, putting in fire line, putting in hose, putting water actually on that edge of that fire, and trying to stop it where it is.
Dozens of people have died and more than 100 are injured after forest fires swept through popular seaside holiday areas near Athens, Greece. Authorities say strong winds are fanning the flames, which are quickly moving into more populated areas. Greece has requested firefighting help from the European Union to help battle the blazes. One man who knows a great deal about Washington-Moscow summits is not ready to call the latest one in Finland a failure. Pavel Palaschenko was chief interpreter for Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev and Foreign Minister Eduard Shevardnadze.
A couple of mistakes were made. I think that, for example, it was a mistake not to try to craft some kind of a joint statement. The press conference did not go well. Those things happen. Stuff happens. But nevertheless, one has to move forward, and perhaps they will correct some of the mistakes that were made and move forward by trying to build a coalition. That's particularly important. Those are still the 2 nuclear superpowers, even though more than 80% of the nuclear weapons that existed at the height of the Cold War have now been destroyed. Nevertheless, they are still the nuclear superpowers. They still are both very influential, And so strategically, I think good relations between Russia and the US are very, very necessary. It'll be very difficult to repair what has been done over the past years, but it is something where I think once the forward movement starts, I think history will be on their side.
Now here's some spectacular video that was shot of a waterspout over the Black Sea. It was captured by a tourist while vacationing in Gelenchik Bay on the southern coast of Russia today. That was pretty incredible. Wow. Fortunately, no waterspouts or funnel clouds here, just a good chance of more rain on the way. I'll have complete weather details coming up in just a moment. It was mainly cloudy today. Tonight, a good chance of showers developing with a low near 9. Tomorrow, mainly overcast with a high expected near 22. A slight chance of showers for Thursday with a high again near 22. Friday, partly cloudy with the mercury climbing to 25. A beautiful weekend is shaping up. Lots of sunshine at 27 on Saturday. Even warmer and 30 degrees expected on Sunday. Looking at our almanac, the average high for this time of year is 26 degrees with an average low of 11. Highest temperature on this date was recorded in 2007 at 34 degrees, and the record low was 4 in 1968. Sunrise was at 5:51, sunset at 9:25. Let's look at tomorrow's temperatures across the country now. Vancouver had a heat warning today. Tomorrow, mainly sunny with a high near 25 expected. Even warmer in Victoria tomorrow, just a few clouds and a high near 28. In our province, Calgary will have a mixture of sun and cloud and should get up to 20. Edmonton will be mainly cloudy and 22. Overcast in Regina at 19 degrees for tomorrow. Lots of cloud cover in Saskatoon as well, as they should see a high near 20. A good chance of rain at 20 in Winnipeg on Wednesday. Spotty showers at 26 expected in Toronto tomorrow. Ottawa had a severe thunderstorm watch today. Tomorrow, the same picture with a high of only 23. Montreal will also have some rain at 27. Over in the Maritimes, Fredericton, New Brunswick will be hot, sunshine and 29. Halifax, Nova Scotia will be mainly cloudy and 27. Charlottetown, PEI will have a mixture of sun and cloud and should get up to 29. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, it'll be mainly cloudy and 26. The Canadian Bankers Association says 1 out of every 126 homeowners in Saskatchewan is 3 or 4 months behind in their mortgage payments. An association report says it's 3 times the national average. The CBA says figures do not include numbers from credit unions and private lenders. That means the tally is not entirely indicative of the market. It notes that the Saskatchewan mortgage market relies heavily on commodity prices, so it expects the numbers to change. The Trump administration is going to pitch in with $12 billion worth of aid to farmers. The money will be used to assist those who have been hit hard by dropping prices in crops and livestock amid a trade war in which agriculture is a main target for retaliation against U.S. tariffs. The assistance will be a mix of direct payments to farmers, commodity purchases for food aid programs, and stepped-up promotion of new U.S. export markets. Canada is one of the largest exporters of food in the world. As Josie Foster reported yesterday, in the first of our series, The Organic Dispute, modern agriculture practices are impacting the health of our planet and bodies. For part 2, Josie discusses how glyphosate, which is widely used in Canada, has been banned in many countries around the world, including Mexico, the Netherlands, and Russia.
When herbicides and pesticides are sprayed year after year, bugs and weeds gradually become resistant to the products. Farmers who once relied heavily on these chemical concoctions are looking for alternatives since they aren't working anymore. Experts say chemical showers have taken a toll on the soil too.
The catch is, can it still provide the level of service we require of it? And that's one of the bigger questions that somebody else is going to have to deal with.
Andrew Manns grows flowers in and around where his vegetables grow to increase soil diversity. He is committed to an organic way of farming and is certified by a governing body. Manns admits doing things this way is more work.
It's been an incredible learning curve, yeah.
So is organic agriculture the way to go?
If there was only one best car, we'd all be driving the same thing.
I guess, do you understand the argument against genetic modification?
No, I don't. I understand the emotional response. I understand very often the response is a trendy, right? So it was very trendy to blame transgenetics, or blame global warming, or blame Trump, or what else. So just people very often do trendy things.
And the trend is on the rise. Between 2016 and 2017, the Canadian organic market saw a 10% increase in demand, and 5,400 certified organic operations are now in Canada, taking up nearly 2 million acres of farmland. So, Canada believes GMOs are safe, but consumers still choose to buy organic foods. In my research, one word came up lots: glyphosate. It's the most widely used chemical in conventional agriculture, and when people choose to buy organic products in Canada, they're assured that their plate hasn't been sprayed with it. Glyphosate is the active ingredient in Monsanto's Roundup product. Monsanto also sells seeds developed to withstand Roundup.
The fact that Monsanto sells both the seeds and Roundup starts to smell bad to people as well.
The Netherlands, Russia, and Mexico are among a growing number of countries who have banned glyphosate. The province of Ontario has made it illegal in home and recreation contexts, but it's still allowed on the plants that create your lunch. In 2017, Canada reevaluated the regulations around glyphosate and concluded it's still safe. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency's examinations are based on data from the companies that sell glyphosate.
I think if you go online and you want to find out how many negative comments there are about Monsanto's work in genetically modified products, seeds, etc., you could spend days, weeks, months.
All of the big ag companies, they're all controlling most of the market. So if you look at market concentration, it is ridiculous in every single part of the food system, and it's only becoming worse. It's only intensifying. And so that market power means that these farmers and these consumers don't have a choice. So if you look at farm gate prices, which is the price that a farmer gets selling their product, they have steadily decreased. They are lower today than they were in the Great Depression. That's insane.
The huge debate around GMOs is tainted by everybody that hates Monsanto, right? So it's like this target of that's the bad guys.
Throughout World War II, Monsanto partnered with the US military to develop bomb initiators to drop in Japan. After the war, Monsanto debuted their pesticide business with dichlorodiphenyl trichloroethane. DDT was later banned after it destroyed Vietnam's agriculture and caused millions of Vietnamese children to be born with deformities. Monsanto became the first company to successfully genetically modify a plant cell with glyphosate. But this company will soon vanish as we know it, as they've just been acquired by Bayer for an estimated $66 billion. Upon 3 requests, Monsanto was unresponsive to an invitation to be interviewed for this story. So what's the big deal with Roundup? The concoction is still deemed safe for farmers to use, while others have found that the small amounts are adding up.
Glyphosate preferentially kills certain microbes, particularly bifidobacteria, which are very, very important for gut health. So what happens when you're chronically exposed, and it's all over the food supply, is that your gut gets imbalanced and you have an overgrowth of pathogens because the bifidobacteria are being knocked down. And that's what we're seeing. And in fact, many papers have been written linking low bifidobacteria and high Clostridia species to autism. Many papers on both of those, both low bifidobacteria and high Clostridia, linked to autism.
In part 3 of our documentary, The Organic Dispute, Josie looks at how glyphosate impacts human health and where the agri-food sector is headed. Now, here's a look at today's markets. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, a motion by a Lethbridge City Councillor to keep needle distribution exclusively at Arches was defeated 5-4 yesterday. Lethbridge has seen a lot of controversy over where the needles are being distributed in our city. When you see news happening, drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. And if you missed any of today's top stories, Check out our full newscast online at bridgecitynews.ca. A new study has found that 14 Canadian children have been linked to ISIS. I will chat with one of our Ottawa contributors, Brian Lilly, next about how Canada will try and rehabilitate them. But first, here's a look at what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Fin de Fiesta Flamenco is a Spain-based Canadian music and dance ensemble. They will be presenting Salvaja, an untamed night of flamenco music and dance on July 25th at 7:30 p.m. at Casa as part of their Canadian tour. For more information and tickets, visit casalethbridge.ca/events. The 2018 Willow Creek Gospel Music Jamboree is taking place July 27th to the 29th in Granham, Alberta. Come see performances by Keepers of the Faith, the Joyful Melody Trio, and 2016 SCMA Entertainers of the Year, the Trudel Family, and more. This event will be hosted by none other than Daryl Jans. Admission is free. For more details, visit gospelmusicjamboree.ca. The Gem of the West Museum in Coaldale is holding a Heritage Day open house on Monday, August 6th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Bring the whole family to see blacksmith demonstrations, ice cream making, and more. Plus, you'll have an opportunity to bring home unique museum souvenirs. Admission is by donation. For more information, visit gemofthewest.ca. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
The City of Toronto is still reeling following a mass shooting earlier this week. Now there's more talk of gun control, especially with the Liberals' Bill C-71. Joining me now from Ottawa is one of our regular contributors, Brian Lilly. Now Brian, many here in the West argue that Bill C-71, all it really does is penalize legal gun owners like farmers and ranchers, but it does nothing to solve gun violence. Now you say this new legislation may actually help keep our streets a little bit safer?
No, I'm not willing to go there. I mean, that's what the Liberals are claiming. There's nothing that I've read in the legislation that, based on what we know of the shooting at this point, would have stopped it. What we're talking about is we have a gun violence problem with criminals in this country. We have a gun violence problem with gangs in this country. They've got it in Surrey. They've got it in Toronto. We've got it in Ottawa to a smaller degree. We're a smaller city. This is something that's going on across the country. This guy doesn't appear to have been gang-related or anything like that. But, okay, would this have changed anything? No, because the law takes aim at duck hunters. It takes aim at deer hunters. It takes aim at sport shooters. The Liberals have made all kinds of hay out of what's called an authorization to transport. Now, anyone in your audience that is a gun owner is going, and the rest of the people are saying, what's that? Well, under the Conservatives, they said that, you know what, you don't need this separate authorization to transport. You don't have to call, fax, or email your local police department every time you want to take your gun to the range or to the gunsmith or what have you. If you are a licensed gun owner and you haven't broken any laws, guess what? You can still transport your gun to all these places. And the Liberals ran around during the last election saying this is horrible and it's just going to cause chaos in the street and people will have their Glock in their glove compartment while they're grocery shopping. That was not the case under the old law. It's not going to be the case once this passes. And by the way, 93% of the cases where people needed this authorization to transport, you still won't need it under the Liberal new law. So there's nothing in the bill that could have stopped this. And look, it's disappointing because all of us want the gun violence to stop. Toronto's had the summer of the gun. It is horrible in that city right now. People want it to stop, but it's the old adage of, well, you don't know how to fix that problem, so you'll deal with this one over here. Because, well, I know how to fix that one. I'll just harass the guy that follows the rules already.
Brian, a new study found that 14 Canadian kids have been linked to ISIS. Brian, there are calls on the government to rehabilitate these kids. Is that possible?
Look, I don't know. It's probably more possible than trying to rehabilitate returning fighters, because what we're talking about are young children, minors. This is a study out of a group out of London, England, and brought forward by the great national security reporter Stuart Bell, who's been around forever. And he specializes in this. And he dug up this study. And 4,600 kids from around the world have been taken into ISIS territory, is the estimate. 14 of them is the estimate. for those that are Canadian. So we're talking kids that are born there or they're young children and taken there. We know that a lot of the fathers have died in the fighting. So they're there with their mothers. They could end up coming back to Canada. And how do you handle them? The report makes a couple of interesting recommendations. They call for a de-radicalization. That has a spotty history. I'm not saying it can't be done, but it does have a spotty history. But they say, look, how you handle these women and their children coming back could determine the future of this sort of group or future such groups. Why? Because if the mothers are out there inculcating this in their children, well, they might raise another generation to go forward and fight again in the future. So I'm more hopeful at the idea of getting children away from this sort of ideology than I am of taking someone that's a hardened battle fighter who voluntarily went into what could only be described as a hellhole to commit atrocities. I'm far more hopeful with de-radicalizing and reintegrating the children than I am with this. But 14 Canadian kids, that is frightening.
It is, certainly is. You in Ontario, you've been battling wildfires. BC is battling wildfires once again across the Okanagan, Summerland and Peachland. And our Prime Minister is also in beautiful British Columbia, but more likely spending a little bit of time on Vancouver Island near Tofino. Tell me a bit about that.
Well, the Prime Minister's taking some downtime, not to be unexpected. And you know what? In the middle of summer, that's the time I don't begrudge the Prime Minister a vacation. He takes a lot of flack for the number of vacations he takes. I think in his first year it was about 10. Some of them range from, 4-day long weekend trips. But of course, for him, it's never just a 4-day long weekend at the cottage, a 45-minute drive away. It's a 4-day long weekend in Whistler or Tofino or what have you. So he's been in British Columbia. We know that Tofino is one of his favorite spots to go. He likes to go surfing there. He likes to be photographed shirtless there. But Andrew Scheer also taking vacation. I don't think we're going to see shots of Andrew Scheer shirtless over the next little while he's vacationing with his family. So, look, it's the time of the year, Hal, and everybody needs a break. And I hope you get one soon. I hope I get one soon. And just enjoy this beautiful country in the summer.
Brian, U.S. President Donald Trump still has bilateral trade deals on the brain on NAFTA, but Prime Minister Justin Trudeau still wants to see a three-way deal done with the United States and Mexico.
Yeah, well, Donald Trump has been talking about doing separate trade deals with Canada and Mexico since he came to office. And we had a chance to have a free trade agreement just with the United States. But Justin Trudeau has always said no. He wants the deal that includes Canada, that includes the United States, that includes Mexico. Well, now we've got this new leader being elected in Mexico. And Donald Trump says, do you want to do a bilateral deal? And AMLO says, sure. Sure. So the Mexicans and the Americans might be getting a bilateral trade deal, and we could be left on the outside. And of course, we know that, Donald Trump is erratic. Donald Trump is difficult to deal with. But we also know that our Prime Minister has annoyed him on several occasions. And I'm not sure that he's changed that stance. I'm not sure that he's doing a better job. And then meanwhile, we've got all these other trade deals that were supposed to be a counterbalance against having so much weight on the U.S., and they're not going anywhere, Hal.
I'm glad you brought that up. The federal Tories called on the Liberals to recall Parliament to pass the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which incorporates a lot of the provisions from the TPP. But, Brian, the Liberals have said no.
Yeah, and I'm not shocked. Look, all through the last month of Parliament, the Conservatives called for this. I know that Andrew Scheer and the Conservatives took a lot of flack for asking a couple of questions about a swing set. And how dare they ask about the swing set? Well, that's what the media actually covered and talked about. But all through the month of June, the Conservatives kept standing up and saying, we will pass your legislation on the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Will you agree to it? And the Liberals would say no. I mean, it's not like it's conservative legislation on the Trans-Pacific Partnership to ratify it. It's liberal legislation. And they said, we'll stand with you now. We'll pass it. Let's get it done so that we can diversify our trade and be better off for it. And apparently there are aspects of the deal that make it better for you to be one of the first countries to ratify it, one of the first 6. Singapore became the 3rd recently. We're not close to ratifying it, and the Liberals are dragging their heels. And I'll tell you one of the reasons how. And this is not something that an awful lot of people are going to talk about. The Liberals are dragging their heels because the Chinese don't like this deal. The Liberals under Justin Trudeau are obsessed with China. We all recall that he said, he admires their basic dictatorship, allows them to turn their economy green on a dime and all that. We know that he and his family have a long history with China. China doesn't like this deal because the TPP was originally dreamed up by Japan and Australia and other countries in the Pacific to say, you know what, we need to do something so that China can't dictate everything to us. So it's supposed to be a counterbalance against China. China doesn't like that. That's why Justin Trudeau walked away from the signing ceremony in Vietnam back in the spring. That's why they're dragging their heels now. We could sign it. And by the way, the European trade agreement, we're all on board with it. But now the Italians are balking at it and saying, we're not so sure we like this.
Wow. And all the trade wars continuing, of course, between Canada and the United States, the tariffs on both countries and with the European Union. So it remains to be seen what happens with that. Now, a story we had on BCN recently was that Ottawa failed to find a new buyer for the Trans Mountain pipeline expansion. But Brian, maybe this isn't necessarily bad news. We're talking about oil, traditionally brings in big bucks, and the price per barrel has been going up.
If they can get it built. Look, we had a protest this past weekend in
15
Ottawa.
people.
15 people.
Right.
But it got lots of media attention, of course. You can have 25,000 people for the March for Life. That'll be ignored. But 15 people delivering a fake pipeline to Parliament Hill is going to get all kinds of attention. Beyond that, though, what do they call it? Camp Cloud in Burnaby. They are refusing to move. And people are saying, we're going to stand in front of the bulldozers. So, look, I don't see them building the pipeline. I want to see it built. I want to see it built with private money, Hal. I want to see it built yesterday. I want to see it creating good jobs in the construction industry. I want to see it creating good jobs in the oil industry. But do you really see this government clearing out a camp like Camp Cloud? I don't. And they haven't done anything yet. I don't think they will. They announced this purchase back in May. And what's happened since? A lot of smoke, a lot of mirrors, a lot of bluster, a lot of rhetoric. Not a lot of action. So, as Elvis used to say, a little less conversation, a bit more action.
Right. Okay, let's talk about the federal government's carbon tax. New Ontario Premier Doug Ford is against it. So is Saskatchewan Scott Moe. Not a lot of premiers are on board, Brian. Is it dead in the water right now, especially leading up to the federal election next year?
Well, PEI started talking, and PEI is led by a Liberal, and they've started talking about not being on board with it. We know that Jason Kenney is knocking at the door in Alberta. Brian Pallister, a PC government in Manitoba, they're kind of trying to be fish and fowl and yet being neither at the same time. So if this gains momentum, expect to see Brian Pallister jump on board this horse. I think it is dead in the water, but the Liberals don't want to admit that yet. Think of it this way. I've been putting it this way since Doug Ford was elected. Doug Ford and the Ontario PCs got elected promising to make life more affordable for voters in Ontario, biggest province in the country, 80 Liberal MPs. And so in the next federal election, those 80 Liberal MPs are going to have to go around saying, no, you should pay a carbon tax. It's going to be great. We know they're going to lose seats on the prairies. The Liberals are going to lose seats on the prairies. They're going to lose a couple in BC. They might even lose some in Atlantic Canada. They've got to make up for those somewhere. The Trudeau majority is not that strong. It's only 14 seats, Hal. So if they start losing 5 in Manitoba and 3 in Alberta and in 3 or 4 in BC, all of a sudden they are looking at being out of power. So do you want to be Justin Trudeau going around saying, vote for me, I'll make your life more expensive? He might want to, but I'd be surprised.
Yeah, carbon tax is not exactly what I'd call a pre-election goodie, right? Now, our premiers got together recently talking about the illegal border crossers. The Fed should pony up the dough for that. They also talked about thinking of dropping import rules when it comes to alcohol in our country. Tell me a bit more about that.
I'm sorry, I can't stop laughing every time I hear them say, and that's the term they use, alcohol imports within Canada. We've got all the premiers talking about, we need to work harder on getting a good free trade deal with America. And here we've got, in a very public, very open way, import restrictions. We're in the same country. Why are we importing anything from another province? It's ridiculous. But they said they would work towards doubling that. Now, some provinces have gotten rid of it completely. Some don't want to move. So they kind of did and they kind of didn't, but they wanted to make that their big selling card coming out of this premier's meeting, because it goes a lot better than saying, We had fulsome discussions on pharmacare, and all the premiers agreed that the federal government should pay for the border crossers. That doesn't sell you headlines. That doesn't make you look good. But saying that you're going to double the amount of booze you can bring across, that gets you good headlines. So that was all a PR stunt.
One of our Ottawa contributors, Brian Lilly, joining me via Skype. Go enjoy yourself a root beer, Brian. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Love is in the air, the flames of romance are kindled, and then at some point the honeymoon comes to an end. Reality and routine, they set in, and sometimes relationships become a little mundane and lose their passion. Now, is there a way to prevent this from happening? Joining me now from San Jose, California is Kathy Lipp, author of Happy Habits for Every Couple, 21 Days to a Better Relationship. Welcome to Bridge City News, Kathy.
Al, thanks so much for having me on.
I think most of us have experience with a relationship that kind of plateaus and then even heads downhill. Now, how can we ensure that this does not happen?
Well, I think it's all about being intentional because, life can just be so overwhelming with jobs and kids and just everyday life. But to say, hey, you know what? When we got married, you were the priority in my life. And so I want to make sure that you stay the priority in my life. And even if you can't do, things every day, to just take a little bit of time out and say, hey, let's be intentional about going out together or spending some time or doing something that we used to love to do will help you from that plateau or downhill back to where you should be.
Now, you have a 21-day assignment for us to develop some habits that helps us out, a little bit of homework. But you actually suggest maybe taking a week to prepare and get another couple to do it with you?
Yeah, and so it's just 21 days of every day doing something that it says to your spouse, hey, you are the priority. And I always think it's so much fun to be able to do it with another couple to kind of keep on track and maybe even hook up for a double date every once in a while just to keep the momentum going because like we said, life gets in the way and it's easy to say, we'll do it tomorrow. But when you get too many tomorrows in a row, that's when you are headed for trouble. To say, just, hey, let's do this together. Let's challenge each other. You can get the guys to compete. So, to be able to keep the momentum going. And it's a lot of fun.
Now, your first habit is to give each other 30 minutes of free time. Do we need a little space sometimes, like maybe the men retreat to the man cave?
Yeah, I wish we had a man cave for my husband. We have basically a lazy boy chair for him. But after my husband's had a long day at work, eh, I have so many questions and sometimes I want to bombard him too much. And so just giving him a little bit of space, I always say, I'm giving you a little time to miss me, honey. It just makes him a little bit more engaged at dinner time. And the nice thing is, then I get 30 minutes at some point during the evening. And maybe it's just to go and relax, read a book, but just a little bit of space where I'm not expected to do chores. He's not expected to do chores. We're just able to relax.
Now, you instruct each spouse to fill out a vital statistics survey. What is that all about?
Okay, so I know that some guys don't remember their wives' birthdays. I know that, thank goodness for Facebook, where you can go and check those statistics now. But also, this little survey has a couple of other things, like what's her or his favorite color? For her or him, favorite fragrance, those kind of things. Just so that when it comes time when you want to do something special, maybe it has, her favorite chocolate flavor of ice cream or something like that. So that the treats, the way that you're saying, hey, I love you, is to remember those things. But you don't have to remember. You can even tear out the page and stick it in a sock drawer. But just so you have access to it. So when it comes time for Christmas or a birthday or that special day throughout the year, you can really hit the mark.
Now, Kathy, I remember the birthday. I just forget the birth year, which is really important. Right?
Yeah, that is really important.
So how about cooking a meal together? How important and how vital is that for a healthy relationship?
I think for us, teamwork is such an important thing. And there's no place usually we can display teamwork more than in the kitchen. And so most of the time the cooking is left up to me, but there's some very important times when it's all my husband. That's when we barbecue and when salsa is happening and spaghetti. And then I know I'm the sous chef. So I just come in and I help with the chopping and the prepping and stuff. But when you can work on something together and then enjoy the benefits of it together, boy, it makes it that much more special. So just coming alongside and letting one person take the lead and just being able to serve the other person can really make for a memorable night.
Now, you encourage men to make a list of 12 things they love about their wives, and women 12 things they respect about their husbands. Tell me a bit more
Yeah.
about that.
Well, we've all heard that men are looking for respect and women are looking for love. And I think that's true to a certain extent. I think we all want to be loved and we all want to be respected. And we know that marriages are healthier when both people respect and love each other. And so it can be very easy to go through an entire day and say, I love you, I love you, I love you. But to be able to tell a guy why you are proud of him, why you respect the decisions he makes, it changes the dynamic of the relationship and it changes who your husband is. And when wives hear the reasons that they're loved and adored, it changes who we are. And so to be able to meet that heartfelt need is something that only our spouse can really do for us. And so we are created to be able to do that for each other. So we should be able to enjoy it and celebrate it.
So you suggest that couples should start to maybe even flirt with each other again after married for 10, 20, 30 years? For example, maybe send a text like little sweet nothing text?
Oh, I am a big believer in flirting. I am a big believer in it because what it does is it says to your spouse, you are the most important person in the world. You and I have a language that we can only speak to each other. And so when you talk about the sacredness of that and the fun that you can have and the flirt that you can have, it makes us more connected and it makes the intimacy level of our relationship rise to places it can't be otherwise.
I also remember the 11th commandment too. Remember thy toilet seat lid and keep it down.
Amen. Amen.
How about getting rid of something that drives your spouse crazy, like some men, they leave the toilet seat lid up, right?
Yes, yes. Well, and it's really interesting. For a lot of us women, it's that old college t-shirt or something like that that is not maybe the most attractive thing for a husband to see us in at night. And so if something is driving your spouse crazy and they're bringing it up, pay attention to that. Because it is a true act of love and sacrifice to be able to do that for your spouse. But what you're saying is, you're more important than this one little thing in my life.
Now, another suggestion is to do something that you enjoy doing together before you were married.
Yeah, I think this is absolutely huge because before you were married, it was all possibilities. It was, the focus was fun and connection. And it's very easy, like we said before, as responsibilities and mortgages come along, my goodness, to try to recapture some of that flirtiness and fun that you had when you were dating. And so doing something that you did before you got married that you both enjoyed. My husband and I we've made a pact with each other since we got married and had all the kids. Man, we have not been good about going to see movies, just to go and have fun and have an evening together. So for the year, what we've decided is we're going to see a movie every single week. And I know it seems challenging, but you know what? It has been so fun to be able to do this and to really connect with each other and to have something to discuss the movie and what we liked or sometimes didn't like. But it's a night just for us. And I know not everybody can do that, but to be intentional to connect one way, maybe it's a show that you both loved to watch when you were dating or something like that, but some way to connect that's just about the two of you.
I remember many years ago reading a story about George and Barbara Bush saying what keeps their romance alive is doing dishes together. He would wash, she would dry, or she would wash and he would dry. How about doing chores together? What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so I think this is something I've discovered since the book, that I used to do the dishes because I was trying to be the nice wife. And I thought, well, nobody likes doing the dishes. So I would do them every night and I would leave my husband to, kind of clean up the kitchen. Well, come to find out, my husband's an engineer. He loves to know that the dishes are done correctly. And apparently I've been doing them incorrectly our entire marriage. So here's the funny thing. He hates cleaning up the kitchen. I don't mind it at all, but he hated having to make decisions. So now he does the dishes. I clean up the kitchen and we talk while we're doing it. And it has changed our evenings. We actually kind of look forward to it.
I'm still working on the proper way of folding towels. That's my big downfall.
Oh,
But anyway,
you know what?
I digress.
You know what? My husband learned how to fold the fitted sheets. He should have never told me that, because now he's in charge of all the fitted sheets in our house.
Now, how important is it to write down a list of 10 things you really like about your spouse? Maybe we need to remind ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's true, especially when we're in a hard place, or maybe we're going through something in our own families. I think about, we're a blended family. And so when we were blending that family, there were times I was like, why did we do this marriage thing? Because it was just so tough. But then I remember my husband loves to honor God. My husband loves to serve others, and to write those things down and say, this is why I fell in love with him. And this is why he is somebody who needs to be celebrated. And there's something about the act of physically writing something out that just changes the way our brain thinks. And so I say, write it down. And you know what? Even the second step, maybe leave it someplace for your spouse to see. That may just be what they needed to hear that day.
How about a potential double date with another couple? You kind of touched on that earlier. How important would that be as well for spicing things up maybe a little bit?
I think that double dating is highly underrated, because when you go out with another couple, one, you're all on your best behavior. Two, you get to share something a little bit about your marriage that other people maybe don't get to see. And then the other thing is, you get to be proud of your spouse. You get to brag on them a little bit. Now, don't go overboard, because no other couple wants to hear that. But they do, to be able to say in front of somebody else, let me tell you this awesome thing that my husband did at the baseball game for my son. There's just something about it. It changes the dynamics of who you are. So we tend to go out. We don't tend to go out on double dates, but we tend to have people over to the house, and we can cook together and we can hang together, and it's a no pressure situation. It's a really great way of connecting.
So happy habits for every couple, 21 days to a better relationship. It's for couples to do together. But what if one of you is maybe not doing your part of the project? Should the other spouse maybe respond and say, hey, pick up the slack a little bit?
Here's what I say to everybody. You know what? We often, different people in the relationship go through different challenging times. And even if Roger is being completely stressed out at work and he hasn't written down 10 reasons he loves me, you know what? Maybe this is an opportunity for me to just serve him. And there may be a time where I need to be served. So it's not to do it to say, hey, look, step up your game. But I would say, commit and do the best that you can. And if things come up, you can still love them, even if you can't check everything off the projects. Just a simple, I love you and you're important to me, can go a long way.
So Kathy, what kind of feedback are you receiving from your readers?
Well, it's been super fun. We've had one of my favorite quotes that somebody said is, I always knew how much I loved my husband, but it was easy to forget how much I liked him. And I really started liking him again during all of this. We also have had reports that 9 months after the Happy Habits, that the birth rate has gone up in certain churches. We are not responsible for these things, but the connection there to say that couples are spending more time together and really loving each other well, it just warms my heart in many, many ways.
That's beautiful to hear. Kathy Lipp, author of Happy Habits for Every Couple, 21 Days to a Better Relationship. Thanks for joining me here on Bridge City News.
Hal, thanks so much for having me on.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and have a great night.